Futures prop firm challenges and funded accounts always seem confusing. You end up changing your risk management a million times and it never feels right. You're either risking too much and you blow your account way too quick, or you're risking too little so you never get out of the challenge phase. And you ask yourself, what is the right approach? Well, I've been trading for the last 6 years. I've received over 200 payouts, and in this video, I'm going to share with you the exact formulas that I use on futures challenges and funded accounts. So no matter the situation that you are in, it will always solve your problem. And let's start by explaining exactly how this is going to work. So a very important detail that you need to know. And the first one is that this is absolutely no financial advice and should not be treated as such. 99% of traders fail. Now, how is this going to work? There's going to be a specific path for each one of you, no matter if you have received payouts, you haven't received payouts, you care about the money, you don't care about the money. And each path leads to a specific percentage of drawdown or consistency risk. And first, I want to explain to you exactly how you can read the formulas before I give them to you. So percentage of drawdown, for example, if the max drawdown is $2,000 and I say risk 20% of the drawdown, then 20% of the $2,000 is going to be $400 per trade. For example, the $2,000 is the drawdown that you are given on the funded next 50K account. And then going back to this, we have a percentage of consistency rule. For example, if the consistency rule is 40% and the profit target is $2.5 thousand, then you know that your maximum winning day is going to be $500. And when I say risk 50% of the consistency rule, it simply means risk 50% of the max winning day. For example, the legacy challenge on funded next has a 40% consistency rule with a $2.5 thousand profit target, which means at maximum you can make $1,000 in a day. And so now you know exactly how we are going to apply the formulas. This is also going to work for Top Step, Apex, Lucid, whatever prop firm you want to work this in. We give a formula so it is universal. So let's start with the challenge phase. First, we have experience. What is your experience with prop firms and what is your experience with trading? There's two variables. You're either unprofitable, which means you've never received payouts, or your payouts haven't covered the challenge fees that you've spent, or profitable, which means you are profitable on prop firms, which means if you've spent around $10,000 on challenges, maybe you've received $20,000 in payouts, that will make you profitable on prop firms, and the approach has to be different. And the reason it has to be different is because someone that is profitable with prop firms, they can go and risk a lot on a challenge because they know it doesn't matter over the long term because they'll just make money from the payouts. Yet a lot of traders, they treat this as the casino and they're like, oh no, I'm unprofitable, but maybe when I receive my payout, blah, blah. No, calm down and understand that it takes time to do something sustainably. Okay? I don't want you to lose a bunch of money. I want you to become profitable traders, right? So unprofitable, if you've never received payouts, the second question is, does the challenge have a consistency rule or not? Right? So let's start with the challenge that does have a consistency rules. How much do you care about the money is the next question. If you care about that, then risking 20% of the drawdown and targeting the consistency rule is the best thing. The reason why is because it gives you 5 different shots that you can take before ever blowing an account. And I might say, well, Kimmel, that is very little amount of shots. Here's the thing. If you're not profitable yet, and you haven't received multiple payouts from prop firms, you should only be focusing on high probability trades, which means you shouldn't have 5 trades in a week. But also, the reason why I'm not going to tell you to risk 10% of the drawdown, it's because then you're going to be stuck in the challenge phase forever. So there needs to be a balance. Even if you care, just focus on higher probability trades. I don't want you to be on a challenge phase forever, so that's why I would go for 20% of the drawdown, targeting the consistency rule or targeting whatever your strategy targets, because like this gives you a leeway if you care about the money. Now, if you couldn't care less, I know that there are people watching that say, bro, it's $100. So basically what you would do if you don't care about the money, for example, you have a high paying job or something and you know your strategy, then I would just risk 50% of the consistency and target a 1 to 2 risk reward. That way, within 2 to 3 days, you could pass the challenge. Now, let's say that there is no consistency rule. This changes a little bit. Why? Because how much do you care about the money? If you care about the money, then you should be risking 20% of the drawdown. I think 20% of the drawdown is something that is conservative, especially if you already know what you are executing on. If not, if you're still looking for a strategy, I have multiple videos for you to do it, or you can check out Funded Trading Blueprint where you can get funded in 90 days, and that is the first link in the description. Now, if you couldn't care less about the money, and I want you to listen very carefully to me, not caring about the money means that right now you could grab that money right now, light fire to it, and that doesn't matter. $100 doesn't change your life for the better or for the worse. It doesn't matter. That is who these people are. Why? Because reminder, you have never received payouts or you are still unprofitable within the prop firm realm. If that is the case, if you are not yet profitable in the prop firm realm and you couldn't care less about the money, I would be risking 50% of the drawdown, and obviously you focus on a very high probability trade. You're not going to enter with a tiny stop. You're not going to enter counter to the trend. Again, these are all things that are important if you understand trading, right? So is this very risky? Yes. But keep in mind, you already know that if you lit this on fire, it doesn't matter. Obviously, limit yourself to also one trade per day. So that is if you have never received payouts or if your payouts do not cover your expenses with prop firms. But now let's say that you are profitable on prop firms and it does have a consistency rule. Now the question still is, how much do you care about the money? If you care, then I'm still gonna risk 20% of the drawdown. Now, if you couldn't care less, this is where it changes because you'll risk about 50 to 75% of the consistency and you target the consistency. For example, this, if you're risking 75% of the consistency rule, if you do quick maths, you would only need around a 1 to 1.3 to target that consistency rule. And that is if you couldn't care less about the money and you are already profitable within prop firms. That's what I would be doing, from 50 to 75% and target the consistency rule. And if you do care about the money, then I do believe that 20% of the drawdown is conservative. And once again, yes, you have 5 shots to make it. But here's the thing. First, you shouldn't go into a prop firm challenge with no strategy. And second, what? You want to be in the challenge for the rest of your life? You want to pay the monthly fee? You want to pay over and over again? No. At the end of the day, prop firms are best for profitable traders that know they will be able to make it over the long term. And if that is not you, then you need a strategy. Then we have a challenge with no consistency rule, and keep in mind you are profitable with prop firms. So no consistency rule, how much do you care about the money? I care or I couldn't care less. So if you care, still risk 20% of the drawdown. I think this is the best way to go for it. You can punch it up to 30, but again, if you really care about the money, I don't want you to have 3 shots before blowing an account. 5, I think, is the sweet spot so that you are not stuck in that challenge phase. Now, if you couldn't care less, then this is where, again, people are gonna hold up a gun to me and be like, how dare you? Listen, you couldn't care less about the money. You are profitable on prop firms. Guess who's here? I'm here. I'm insanely profitable with prop firms. So you can bet that I'm risking pretty much 100% of my drawdown, right? On futures challenges. I am doing this, right? And if you couldn't care less about the money, you are profitable already with prop firms, then you shouldn't really be risking less than 50 to 75% of the drawdown. Why is that? Well, because if you've profited 6 figures or even 5 figures from prop firms and you couldn't care less about the money, then what does $100 really mean? So that is the approach that I would have on the challenge phase. So this is all about thinking about your situation and how to go about it. Now, let's go into the funded phase. Why? Because what is more important than passing a challenge is getting that payout. So let's go into the funded phase. On the funded phase, we go back to the same question. Have you received payouts or have you never received payouts? And do those payouts cover all of the expenses that you've had with prop firms or not? So in case you are still unprofitable, you haven't received payouts, or it doesn't cover the expenses, then I would simply risk 10% of the total drawdown. And now I might say, well, Kimmel, that is not that much. Doesn't matter. You need to cover your expenses first before you are even aggressive on the funded accounts. You need to understand this. Prop firms are here with one goal: for you to fail, right? But once you're funded, you now have the potential to finally make money. And if you've never made money from prop firms, then why do you think that risking 10% of the total drawdown on the funded account is a lot? It doesn't make any sense because what you've been doing hasn't been working. So if you've never received payouts or your payouts do not cover the prop firm expenses, then I would risk 10% of the total drawdown and only on a quarter of your accounts. For example, if you have 20 accounts, then it would be copy trading on 5 accounts. That's the maximum. Why? Because if you lose that, you still have the potential to make money with all other 15 accounts that you had. Or with Funded Next, if you are max allocated, you would be risking it with 1. On Funded Next, which by the way, you can use code KT, is 30 days. Top Step is 30 days. Apex, I don't think they have a inactivity rule. So only risk 10% of the drawdown. Now, if you are profitable on prop firms, the second question is there a consistency rule? Right? If there is, then how big of a payout do you want? You don't really care, which means, listen, $1,000, $2,000, everything that is money in my bank account, perfect, or you want that massive payout. Here's the thing, I don't recommend most people going for that massive payout because I know that if you're watching this, making an extra $5,000 a month from trading would already be amazing, right? So I don't recommend most people going for that big payout, but if you do, then I'm also going to give you a formula. But if you don't care how big of a payout you want, so for example, $5,000 a month is more than enough, then I would be risking about 20% of the total drawdown. Because this allows for the consistency rule to not get blown out of proportion in terms of the amount of money that you have to make, but it also is a substantial amount. So for example, on a 50K account, if you have $2,000 worth of drawdown, then you would be risking about $400. And I think that that is great, right? It's more than enough for most people that are watching. And then you would be risking this on a quarter of your accounts. Again, you'd be risking $400 per 5 accounts, which would be making $2,000, right? But if you want that big payout, you'd be risking the same 20% of the total drawdown, but you would be doing it on 75% of your accounts. Kemal, why not 100% of my accounts? Do you really want to lose the potential for you to make money? This is the thing. So many people go back to square one. It's like, oh, blow it all, come back, blow it all, come back. Why would you do that? You lose the potential to make money. That is insane to me, right? I know most of you just want to get to that next level of consistent payouts, right? So don't blow all of your accounts. That is your only potential to make money, right? So yes, risk 20% of the total drawdown and do it on 75% of your accounts, or 20% of the total drawdown on 1/4 of your accounts. And I think this is clear to understand that if you're doing this, you probably should have a profitable strategy, right? Now, let's say that there is no consistency rule. Oh my God. This is where everything's gonna go crazy. Just kidding. So how big of a payout do you want? I don't care, or it's big. By the way, this is for people who are profitable in prop firms. Your payouts cover your expenses. How big of a payout should you go for? You don't care, or you want a big payout. If you don't care, I would still risk 20% of the total drawdown and do it on a quarter of your accounts. If you want to go for big, I would still do 20% of the total drawdown with 75% of your accounts. The only difference is that it's going to be easier to withdraw if you don't have that consistency rule. And that is the way that I would approach the funded phase. And notice that if your payouts do not cover your expenses in prop firms, you should only be risking 10% of your total drawdown. And by the way, this isn't even financial advice. 99% of traders fail, right? If you want a profitable strategy for your payouts to finally outweigh the amount of expenses that you have with prop firms, then check out Funded Trading Blueprint with the first link in the description. And if you want to check out Funded Next, then you can use code KT on futures or code Kimmel on CFDs. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.